The diamond bracelet slipped from my wrist, clattering against the hardwood floor of the country club as my new son-in-law's words cut through the celebration like a blade through silk. "Well, at least we know where Emma gets her modest expectations from," Michael had announced to his wealthy fraternity brothers, his practiced smile never wavering as he gestured dismissively toward me. "This is the budget-conscious mother-in-law I was telling you about." The entire engagement party seemed to freeze. 50 guests in designer gowns and $1,000 suits turned to stare at the 52-year-old woman in the simple black cocktail dress from Macy's. That's when Michael Patterson's confidence cracked for just a split second, because something in my expression made him realize he might have miscalculated. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button right now and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, because what I'm about to tell you will restore your faith in karma. Let me take you back to how we got here, because this story is about to become the most satisfying comeback you've ever witnessed. My name is Victoria Sterling, but everyone calls me Vicky. For the past 12 years, I've been perfecting the art of strategic invisibility, which turns out to be excellent preparation for corporate warfare. My daughter Emma had been dating Michael for just over a year, and I'd met him exactly 3 times before tonight. 3 carefully orchestrated dinners where he'd asked probing questions about my fixed-income lifestyle, and whether I might need assistance with expenses as I approached retirement. The engagement party was held at the exclusive Riverview Country Club, the kind of place where membership costs more than most people's annual salary. Michael's family had spared no expense: ice sculptures, a string quartet, enough champagne to float a yacht. I'd chosen my outfit deliberately. A simple black dress from a department store, paired with my grandmother's vintage pearl earrings. Nothing flashy, nothing that would contradict the carefully constructed image I'd maintained for over a decade. Because what Michael Patterson didn't know, what none of them suspected, was that the budget-conscious widow he'd just publicly humiliated controlled assets worth just over $1.2 billion. Let me tell you how a high school principal's wife became one of the most powerful anonymous investors on the East Coast, because this backstory makes the revenge even sweeter. Make sure you're subscribed because this is about to get absolutely wild. It started with my late husband Richard's after-school tutoring business. Richard taught chemistry at Lincoln High for 30 years, but his real genius was simplifying complex concepts. In 2011, he developed a revolutionary online learning platform that could adapt teaching methods to individual student learning styles. We thought maybe we'd make enough to retire comfortably. We had no idea we were sitting on an educational technology goldmine. The platform sold to Pearson Education for $45 million in 2013. Emma was 21 then, finishing her degree in social work and full of dreams about helping disadvantaged children. Richard and I made a crucial decision that would shape the next 11 years of our lives. We told Emma we'd received a substantial insurance settlement after Richard's car accident, enough to be very comfortable, but nothing extravagant. She never questioned it, probably assumed it was a few million at most. What Emma didn't know was that $45 million was just the foundation. Richard and I began investing with the patience and methodical approach he'd used to teach chemistry for 3 decades. We started with established tech companies, then moved into emerging markets as we understood them better. Our real breakthrough came when we began investing in undervalued educational technology startups. Richard's background gave us insights that Wall Street missed. We could recognize genuinely innovative teaching tools versus flashy gimmicks. By 2018, our portfolio was worth over $400 million. When Richard died suddenly of a heart attack 2 years ago, I inherited everything. $400 million had grown to $600 million through careful management and strategic acquisitions. But I didn't stop there. In the 2 years since Richard's death, I'd been operating under a shell company called Sterling Educational Investments. I'd quietly acquired controlling interests in 7 different education technology companies, 2 private school chains, and 3 educational publishing houses. My current net worth is approximately $1.2 billion. While my future son-in-law had been patronizing me about budget management and offering to help me understand complex financial products, I'd been making investment decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of students across the country. The beauty of my situation was that nobody expected a high school principal's widow to be a major player in anything. I drove a reliable Honda, lived in a nice but unremarkable apartment, and shopped at normal stores. What people didn't see was that my apartment was actually a penthouse I owned in a building I'd purchased as an investment property. My Honda was one of 12 vehicles I kept in different cities for convenience. And those normal stores often involved private shopping appointments after hours. I'd perfected the art of hiding in plain sight. Emma knew I was comfortable, but she had no idea about the scope of my investments. When I traveled to oversee business operations, I told her I was visiting old friends or taking senior citizen tours. When I attended board meetings, I claimed I was at book clubs or volunteer activities. The lies weren't malicious, they were protective. I'd watched too many wealthy families destroy themselves through entitlement, competition, and greed. I wanted Emma to build her own life based on her values, not my bank account. But yesterday's humiliation at the engagement party had awakened something I'd kept carefully contained for 12 years. If you're loving this setup, smash that like button because the revenge I'm planning will absolutely blow your mind. The morning after the engagement party, I sat in my home office, a room Emma had never seen because I kept it locked and told her it was storage, reviewing everything I knew about Michael Patterson and his family. James Patterson owned a mid-sized law firm specializing in corporate litigation. Successful, but not extraordinarily so. The family lived well, but within the bounds of upper-middle-class comfort. His wife Patricia served on several charity boards and spent considerable energy maintaining their social position. She was the type of woman who measured success by invitation lists and donation recognition ceremonies. Michael himself worked as a financial advisor at his father's firm, though my preliminary research suggested his client base was relatively modest. He drove a leased BMW, lived in a rented condo in a nice area, and carried himself like someone accustomed to luxury he couldn't quite afford. What interested me most was their assumption that Emma's financial prospects were limited by my apparent circumstances. Michael had made several comments over the past year about helping Emma understand realistic expectations about their future lifestyle. He'd also suggested more than once that I might benefit from professional financial guidance as I aged, offering to connect me with qualified advisors who could help me manage my limited resources more effectively. The condescension had been subtle but constant. My phone rang, interrupting my research. Emma's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, I'm so sorry about last night," she said immediately. Michael was just nervous, and sometimes he says stupid things when he's trying to impress people. "It's fine, sweetheart." "No, it's not fine." He shouldn't have implied that you were somehow beneath their standards. It was cruel and unfair. I felt my heart break a little, hearing the hurt in my daughter's voice. She was defending me against the man she loved, caught between loyalty and romance. "Emma, can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course. Do you think Michael loves you for who you are, or does he love what he thinks you represent?" The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, that's not fair. Every relationship involves some practical considerations." "What kind of practical considerations?" "Well, he knows you're comfortable financially, and that matters for planning a future together." "Comfortable how?" "You know, the insurance settlement from Dad's accident. Michael thinks that provides good security for our family planning." The insurance settlement that had never existed. The comfortable lifestyle that represented less than 0.001% of my actual resources. "Emma, what exactly has Michael told you about his expectations for our family's financial future?" "He's mentioned that it would be smart to coordinate investment strategies, maybe set up some kind of family financial planning structure." She hesitated. "He thinks you might benefit from professional management of your assets." There it was. Michael Patterson thought he was marrying into modest money that he could help manage and gradually control. He had no idea he was about to become my son-in-law. I spent the next week planning Michael's education with the same methodical approach Richard and I had used for our most complex investments. First, I called my attorney, Harrison Blackwood, who'd been handling my corporate acquisitions for the past 5 years. "Harrison, I need you to research Patterson and Associates law firm. I want to know everything, client base, revenue streams, financial vulnerabilities, competitive position. Are you considering an acquisition? I'm considering several possibilities. Within 48 hours, Harrison had provided a comprehensive analysis that was even more interesting than I'd expected. Patterson and Associates was struggling. James Patterson had made several poor business decisions over the past 3 years, including taking on expensive office space and hiring additional staff before securing sufficient client base to support the expansion. The firm was currently 6 months behind on their lease payments and carrying substantial debt. They were profitable on paper, but cash flow was precarious. More importantly, their largest client, a mid-sized manufacturing company called Riverside Industries, was considering switching to a larger firm that could handle their expanding legal needs. If they lost Riverside Industries, Patterson and Associates would be bankrupt within months. Next, I researched Michael's financial advisory practice. His client list was modest, his investment returns were average, and his income was largely dependent on commissions from selling financial products that carried high fees but mediocre performance. The picture that emerged was of a family living slightly beyond their means, maintaining appearances through credit and expectations rather than solid financial foundations. Perfect. I made a phone call to my investment manager, Caroline Walsh, who'd been handling my acquisitions through Sterling Educational Investments. Caroline, I need you to acquire 2 companies for me. Riverside Industries and Patterson and Associates. Both of them. That's an unusual combination. Trust me. And Caroline, I want the acquisition structured so that the sellers don't know they're selling to the same buyer. How quickly do you need this done? Before my daughter's wedding in 6 weeks. 3 weeks later, James Patterson received a call that he thought would save his firm. Riverside Industries had been purchased by a private equity group that wanted to retain Patterson and Associates as their primary legal counsel, with a substantially increased retainer and expanded scope of work. What James didn't know was that the private equity group was a shell company I controlled, and I just guaranteed his firm's financial security while gaining complete oversight of his business operations. The same week, Riverside Industries management received notice that their company had been acquired by Sterling Educational Investments, which planned to expand their manufacturing operations while maintaining their current workforce and management structure. Both transactions closed smoothly, with both families celebrating their unexpected good fortune. Michael was particularly pleased about his father's improved business prospects, mentioning several times over dinner how smart James had been to position the firm for such a beneficial client relationship. Dad's always been great at building strategic partnerships, he told Emma proudly. This new arrangement should set us up really well for the future. Emma had looked at me across the restaurant table, smiling at her fiancé's enthusiasm while I nodded approvingly at James Patterson's good fortune. Neither of them suspected that the strategic partnership Michael was celebrating had been orchestrated by the woman he'd dismissed as financially naive. The 6 weeks leading up to Emma's wedding were a masterclass in controlled anticipation. Michael's family began planning an elaborate celebration, confident in their improved financial position. The Pattersons booked the most expensive venue they could find, hired top-tier vendors, and invited everyone they'd ever wanted to impress. Michael himself became increasingly generous with expensive gifts for Emma, taking credit for his family's improved circumstances and making grand statements about their bright financial future. "Your mom must be so relieved," he told Emma over dinner one evening, "knowing that you're marrying into a family with strong business connections and solid financial planning." Emma had looked uncomfortable at his presumption, but said nothing. Meanwhile, I continued my quiet research into Michael's character and motivations. I discovered he'd been telling his friends that he was upgrading his lifestyle by marrying someone whose family had good investment discipline and accumulated assets. He'd specifically mentioned my insurance settlement as providing excellent foundation capital for their future planning. The most revealing conversation I uncovered was a phone call he'd made to his college roommate 3 weeks before the wedding. "The beauty of this situation," Michael had said, "is that Emma's mom is smart enough to have money but not sophisticated enough to manage it properly. She'll be grateful for professional guidance, and Emma will inherit everything eventually anyway." He'd been planning to gradually gain control of assets he thought I had, while positioning himself as the financial expert helping a naive widow make better decisions. The audacity was breathtaking. 2 days before the wedding, I made one final preparation. I called Emma and asked if she'd like to have lunch, just the two of us. "Mom, is everything okay? You sound different." "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just want to spend some time with my daughter before she becomes a married woman." We met at a small cafe near her apartment, the kind of place we'd always gone for mother-daughter conversations. "Emma," I began carefully, "are you happy with Michael? Really, truly happy?" "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "Because I want to make sure you're marrying him for the right reasons." She studied my face with the same intensity she'd inherited from Richard. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" "I'm not telling you anything, sweetheart. I'm asking whether the man you're marrying loves you for who you are, or whether he loves what he thinks you might provide him." "That's not fair. Michael has never asked me for anything financial. Hasn't he? He's never mentioned your inheritance prospects? Never discussed how we might coordinate family investments?" Emma's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "He cares about our future together," she said finally. "That includes financial planning." "Emma, what exactly has Michael told you about his family's recent business success?" "His dad's firm landed a major client. Michael said it shows how smart the Patterson family is about building strategic relationships." I almost smiled. "Did he mention that this major client might affect our family in any way?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just curious about his perspective on family financial planning." As we parted that afternoon, I kissed Emma's forehead and told her I loved her more than anything in the world. It was the last completely honest thing I'd be able to say for the next 48 hours. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Emma looked radiant in her grandmother's restored vintage gown, and Michael appeared genuinely happy as they exchanged vows. I sat in the front row wearing my most understated outfit, a navy blue dress and small pearl necklace, watching my daughter promise to love and honor a man who saw her as a financial opportunity. The reception was where Michael finally showed his true colors. He'd had several glasses of champagne when he approached me with his fraternity brothers, introducing me as Emma's practical mother who's taught her excellent money management skills. The conversation that followed was a clinic in casual condescension. "Victoria here has done such a smart job building a nest egg on a teacher's pension," Michael announced to his friends. "Really impressive financial discipline." "That's wonderful," replied his friend Derek, who I recognized as a junior associate at a major investment firm. "It's rare to see people manage money so wisely on a limited income." "Exactly," Michael continued, warming to his theme. "Victoria's been very conservative with her investments, which is smart at her age. Emma and I have been talking about helping her transition to some more sophisticated strategies now that we're family." I sipped my wine and let him continue. "The great thing is, Victoria's built up enough capital that with proper professional management, we could probably double her returns within a few years." "How generous of you to offer your expertise," I said quietly. "Well, family takes care of family," Michael replied magnanimously. "Emma's inheritance prospects are important to our future planning." That's when Derek asked the question that started the avalanche. "What kind of inheritance are we talking about? Just rough numbers." Michael glanced around conspiratorially. "Obviously this stays between us, but we're looking at probably 2 to 3 million. Not huge by our standards, but significant enough to make a difference in long-term planning." 2 to 3 million. I nearly choked on my champagne. "Michael," I said carefully, "what makes you think my assets are worth 2 to 3 million? "Well, Emma mentioned the insurance settlement from her father's accident. Plus you've been investing consistently for years. Conservative estimate based on normal returns." He had no idea that his conservative estimate represented approximately 0.25% of my actual net worth. "That's very analytical of you," I managed. "I like to be thorough about family financial planning," he replied proudly. "Speaking of which, Victoria, I've been meaning to talk to you about rolling over some of your retirement accounts." I could probably get you better performance with more aggressive allocation. Guys, if you think this conversation is cringy, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit that subscribe button because this man is about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. That's when James Patterson, Michael's father, approached our little group with a champagne flute in one hand and his phone in the other. Michael, have you seen this? He showed us his phone screen displaying an email from their major client, Riverside Industries. They want to expand our retainer agreement and add corporate acquisition support to our services. Michael beamed with pride. See, Victoria? This is what I mean about strategic business relationships. Dad's been building this client relationship for years. Actually, James continued, looking slightly confused, they specifically mentioned that their new ownership group requested our firm by name. Apparently, Sterling Educational Investments has very specific preferences about legal representation. The blood drained from my face, but not for the reason they thought. Sterling Educational Investments. I repeated slowly. Yes, they acquired Riverside Industries last month. Fascinating company. They specialize in education technology investments. Very discreet, very selective. James was scrolling through his email. The managing partner is listed as V. Sterling, but we've never actually met. All communication goes through intermediaries. Michael was nodding along enthusiastically. Dad's been trying to get a meeting with them for weeks. Sterling Educational is supposed to be one of the most sophisticated investment groups on the East Coast. Derek looked impressed. V. Sterling? I've heard that name in finance circles. Supposed to be brilliant but incredibly private. Nobody knows much about the personal background. I felt the walls of my carefully constructed privacy beginning to crumble. Victoria. Emma had appeared beside me, looking concerned. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired. Maybe you should sit down, Michael suggested with exaggerated concern. All this business talk might be overwhelming. That condescending tone was the final straw. I looked around at this group of people. My daughter's new husband dismissing me as confused by complex financial concepts, his father unknowingly describing my business operations, his friends nodding along with assumptions about my limitations. Actually, I said, standing up straighter, I find the business discussion quite interesting. Really? Michael's tone suggested he found this surprising. Yes. Tell me more about this Sterling Educational Investments. What kind of companies do they typically acquire? James pulled up more information on his phone. Educational technology, mostly. Publishing houses, private schools, online learning platforms. They seem to focus on undervalued companies with strong fundamentals but poor management. Sounds like a smart strategy. Very smart. Whoever V. Sterling is, they understand the education market better than most Wall Street analysts. He paused, looking thoughtful. You know, it's interesting. Sterling Educational's investment approach reminds me of how teachers think about long-term student development. Very patient, very focused on sustainable growth rather than quick profits. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed out loud. That's when Patricia Patterson joined our conversation, having overheard her husband's discussion about his important new client. James, are you boring these young people with business talk? She asked with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Actually, I was just explaining about our new client relationship with Sterling Educational Investments. Patricia's expression shifted slightly. Oh yes, that mysterious investment group. Michael mentioned you've been trying to arrange a meeting with the managing partner. V. Sterling, James nodded. Very elusive. Their legal team handles all communication, but I get the impression the principal is someone with extensive industry experience. It's probably some retired education executive, Michael said dismissively. Someone who got lucky with good timing and now thinks they understand high-level finance. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Retired education executive? I repeated. Well, Who else would focus so heavily on education investments? Probably someone who spent their career in school administration and developed some industry contacts. Derek nodded along. Makes sense. Though they'd need substantial capital to operate at sterling educational's level. We're talking hundreds of millions in assets under management. Which is exactly why professional oversight matters, Michael continued. Even if someone has money, managing it properly requires expertise and sophisticated understanding of market dynamics. I looked around at these people discussing my life's work like it was an abstract case study, making assumptions about motivations and capabilities they couldn't begin to understand. Michael, I said quietly, what would you say if you discovered that someone in your immediate circle had been managing hundreds of millions of dollars for years? I'd say that sounds like a fantasy, he laughed. That kind of wealth doesn't hide in plain sight. Emma was watching this conversation with growing confusion. Mom, why are you asking these hypothetical questions? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message that changed everything. The message was from Caroline Walsh, my investment manager. Victoria, the Patterson acquisition is complete. You now own controlling interest in both companies. Should I schedule the transition meetings? I stared at that text while Michael continued explaining to his friends why sophisticated wealth management required professional expertise that people like me couldn't possibly possess. Excuse me, I said, standing up from the table. I need to make a phone call. As I walked toward the country club's exit, I heard Michael telling his group, poor woman's probably calling her financial advisor about something she doesn't understand. I stepped outside and called Caroline back. The transition meetings, I said. Schedule them for tomorrow morning. Both companies, same conference room. Are you sure? That will make the connection obvious. I'm counting on it. Subscribe right now if you want to see how I'm about to destroy this man's entire worldview. The revenge I'm planning is absolutely diabolical. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I dressed like the billionaire I actually was. Custom-tailored charcoal gray suit from my personal designer. Subtle but unmistakable designer accessories. The kind of understated elegance that only comes with unlimited resources and impeccable taste. I drove to the meeting in my Bentley, the car I kept parked in a private garage across town, registered under one of my shell companies. The transition meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the downtown offices of Harrison Blackwood's law firm. I'd arranged for both the Patterson firm and Riverside Industries management to attend, ostensibly to discuss the new business relationship between the companies. What they didn't know was that they were about to meet their new owner. I arrived early and positioned myself in the conference room's head chair, spreading my files across the mahogany table like a general preparing for battle. James Patterson arrived first, looking slightly nervous but optimistic. He'd brought Michael along for exposure to high-level client relationships. Mr. Patterson, I said, standing to shake his hand. Thank you for making time this morning. Of course, he paused, realizing he'd never gotten my name from his email communications. Sterling, I said simply. Victoria Sterling. I watched recognition flicker. Sterling? But aren't you Emma's mother? Michael had gone completely white. Mom, what are you doing here? Managing my business interests, I replied calmly. Please, everyone sit down. We have quite a bit to discuss. The next hour was perhaps the most satisfying 60 minutes of my entire life. I began with a presentation I'd prepared specifically for this audience, using the same methodical approach Richard had employed for his most challenging chemistry lessons. Gentlemen, let me explain exactly what's happened over the past month, I began, activating the conference room's presentation system. Sterling Educational Investments, which I founded and control, has acquired both Patterson and Associates and Riverside Industries. The purpose of these acquisitions was strategic. I wanted to understand the character and motivations of certain individuals before making important family decisions. James Patterson's mouth fell open. Michael looked like he might faint. Over the past year, I continued, I've been listening to discussions about my financial limitations, my need for professional guidance, and my daughter's inheritance prospects. These discussions have been illuminating. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of Michael's comments about family financial planning. Michael, you've spent considerable time explaining to Emma how your family could help manage my modest resources more effectively. You've offered to connect me with qualified financial advisors. You've discussed coordinating family investment strategy. I was just trying to be helpful, he managed weakly. Were you? Or were you positioning yourself to gradually gain control of assets you assumed I had? I clicked to the next slide, showing transcripts of conversations he'd had with his friends about Emma's inheritance prospects. This is from a conversation you had with Derek Morrison 3 months ago. You specifically mentioned that marrying Emma would provide excellent foundation capital for your financial planning. The silence in the room was absolute. Foundation capital from a high school principal's widow who needed help understanding complex financial products. Michael's face had gone from white to gray. I never said. You said exactly that. Multiple times. To multiple people. I clicked to the final slide, showing the organizational chart of my actual business empire. Sterling Educational Investments controls assets worth approximately $1.2 billion. We own significant stakes in 12 companies, hold licensing agreements on 43 different educational technologies, and employ over 3,000 people across North America. James Patterson made a choking sound. The modest insurance settlement you've heard so much about? That was a story I told to protect my daughter from people who might try to use her for access to money they hadn't earned. I looked directly at Michael. People exactly like you. That's impossible, Michael whispered. You drive a Honda. You live in a regular apartment. I drive a Honda Accord in this city because it's practical and unremarkable. I also own a Bentley, a Tesla, and several other vehicles for different occasions. I paused for effect. The apartment you visited is a penthouse in a building I own. I kept the furnishings modest to maintain the impression I wanted you to have. But why? Emma had appeared in the doorway, having arrived for what she thought was a routine business meeting. Mom, what's going on here? I turned to my daughter, feeling 12 years of protective deception crystallizing into this single moment of truth. Emma, I've been lying to you about our financial situation since you were 18 years old. Your father and I were never just comfortable. We were extraordinarily wealthy. And I've spent the past year watching your fiancé plan how to gradually gain control of money. He thought I was too naive to manage properly. That's not true, Michael protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. This is from last week's conversation with your friend Bradley about post-wedding financial planning. Michael's voice filled the conference room. The key is being patient. Victoria's got good money sense but limited sophistication. If I handle it right, Emma and I could be managing most of her portfolio within a few years. Emma sank into the nearest chair, her face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and growing anger. Michael, she said quietly. Is that really what you said? Emma, you have to understand the context. The context is that you've been planning to manipulate my mother while pretending to help her. I watched my daughter process the betrayal, feeling proud of her moral clarity even as my heart broke for her pain. Here's what's going to happen, I said, retaking control of the conversation. Michael, you have 2 choices. I placed 2 envelopes on the conference table. Option 1. You call off the wedding, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, and accept a settlement of $1 million to compensate for wedding expenses and lost time. Michael stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Option 2. You proceed with the wedding, sign a prenuptial agreement that protects Emma's interests, and accept that any relationship with my family will be based on honesty rather than manipulation. What does the prenup say? He asked weakly. That Emma maintains complete control of any assets she inherits from me. That you waive all claims to family business interests. And that any attempt to manipulate or coerce Emma regarding financial decisions results in immediate divorce with no settlement. James Patterson found his voice. Mrs. Sterling, this seems rather extreme. Mr. Patterson, Your son planned to financially manipulate my daughter based on false assumptions about family assets. I consider that extreme enough to warrant extreme responses. I stood up and gathered my materials. Michael, you have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. As I reached the door, Emma called out, "Mom, what if he chooses option 1? I turned back to look at my daughter, seeing Richard's strength in her eyes along with something new, a steel I recognized from my own mirror. Then you'll know exactly who he was, and you can build a life based on truth instead of manipulation. Michael chose option 2. He signed the prenuptial agreement and proceeded with the wedding, though the ceremony had a subdued quality that everyone noticed but no one discussed directly. The marriage lasted exactly 4 months, not because of financial issues, but because Emma realized she'd fallen in love with someone who didn't actually exist. The Michael she'd thought she knew had been a performance designed to access resources he'd imagined she would inherit. When she finally understood the depth of his deception, she filed for divorce herself. "Mom," she told me over dinner 6 months later, "I want to thank you for protecting me from someone who would have spent our entire marriage trying to manipulate both of us. I never wanted to deceive you about our finances," I said. "I just wanted you to choose your path based on your values, not my bank account. I understand that now. But Mom, there's something I need to ask you." "Anything. I want to work for you. Not because you're my mother, not because of the money, but because what you've built is exactly the kind of educational innovation Dad would have loved." Today, Emma serves as the Director of Educational Outreach for Sterling Educational Investments. She's expanded our scholarship programs, developed partnerships with underserved school districts, and created mentorship opportunities that reach thousands of students. She's also dating a middle school science teacher named David who drives a beat-up Toyota, lives in a modest apartment, and has no idea that his girlfriend's mother could buy the entire school district where he works. When Emma told me about David, she smiled and said, "Mom, I think you're going to love him. He reminds me of Dad, passionate about education, kind to everyone, and completely unimpressed by anything except good teaching. I can hardly wait to meet him." Michael Patterson, meanwhile, discovered that choosing option 2 came with unexpected consequences. The prenuptial agreement he'd signed included clauses about public disclosure of the marriage's circumstances. When the divorce became final, certain details about his approach to family financial planning became part of the public record. His financial advisory practice suffered significantly when potential clients learned about his methods for managing family assets. Last I heard, he was working as a junior associate at a large firm, starting over at the bottom of an industry that values trust above all else. His father's law firm, however, continues to thrive under my ownership. James Patterson never learned the full extent of what his son had planned, and I saw no reason to destroy his livelihood for his son's mistakes. This entire experience taught me several important things about money, family, and the difference between protection and deception. First, hiding wealth from people you love doesn't protect them. It just delays the moment when they have to confront who they really are and who they've chosen to surround themselves with. Second, people reveal their true character most clearly when they think they're in a position of advantage. Michael showed me exactly who he was when he thought he was talking to someone he could manipulate. Third, the most dangerous people aren't the ones who openly demand your money. They're the ones who convince you that sharing it with them is your idea. Michael never asked me directly for money. Instead, he spent a year positioning himself as the helpful expert who could guide my limited understanding of financial matters. He made me feel grateful for his attention while planning to gradually assume control of assets he'd convinced me I couldn't manage alone. That's a level of manipulation that goes far beyond simple greed. But here's what surprised me most about this entire experience. The real victory wasn't exposing Michael's true motives or protecting my assets from his manipulation. The real victory was watching Emma discover her own strength. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, she called me with a proposal that took my breath away. "Mom, I've been thinking about Sterling Educational Investments and what you've built. I want to expand our scholarship programs specifically for students from financially disadvantaged backgrounds who want to pursue education careers." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. But I want to fund it myself. Not with your money, with mine." I was confused. Emma, you don't have. Actually, I do. I've been saving every penny from my social work salary for the past 7 years. I live in a tiny apartment, drive a used car, and spend almost nothing on myself because I've been building my own foundation fund. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I have about $180,000 saved. I know it's not much compared to your resources, but I want to start my own scholarship program for kids who want to become teachers but can't afford education school. I sat in my penthouse office, looking out at the city skyline, and realized that I'd succeeded in the most important way possible. I'd raised a daughter who valued contribution over consumption, who wanted to build something meaningful rather than inherit something easy. Emma, I said carefully, what if I told you that your $180,000 could be leveraged to create something much larger? What do you mean? What if Sterling Educational Investments matched every dollar you contribute, and provided administrative support to help your scholarships reach more students? You'd do that. I'd do that because you're not asking for my money. You're asking to use your money more effectively. That's the difference between Michael's approach and yours. We launched the Emma Sterling Foundation 6 months later. Her initial $180,000 contribution, combined with Sterling Educational's matching funds and operational support, has already provided full scholarships to 47 students pursuing education degrees. More importantly, Emma's hands-on approach to scholarship selection and student mentoring has created a program that changes lives rather than just writing checks. If this story is inspiring you to think differently about wealth, family, and authenticity, make sure you're subscribed and let me know in the comments what you're building in your own life. The irony of Michael's entire approach was that if he'd genuinely loved Emma and treated me with basic respect, he eventually would have been welcomed into extraordinary wealth and opportunity. If he'd married Emma for love and built a relationship based on honesty, I would have gradually brought him into the family business. Sterling Educational Investments is always looking for talented people who understand both finance and education. If he'd shown genuine care for Emma's happiness rather than calculating her inheritance prospects, he would have discovered that my approach to family wealth is generous to those who earn trust and contribute value. Instead, his manipulation and condescension cost him access to opportunities he couldn't have imagined in his most ambitious dreams. The prenuptial agreement he signed included clauses about confidentiality, which means he can never publicly discuss what he learned about my actual resources. He has to live with the knowledge that he destroyed his chance at a life most people could never achieve, and he can't even tell anyone why. These days, I split my time between managing Sterling Educational Investments and enjoying the relationship with Emma that I'd always hoped we'd have. She's learned to appreciate the complexity of building something from nothing, while I've learned that protecting people from truth doesn't actually protect them. It just delays the inevitable reckoning with reality. Michael's attempt to manipulate our family taught us both valuable lessons about recognizing authentic relationships versus transactional ones. Last month, Emma brought David to Sunday dinner at my penthouse. When he saw the apartment for the first time, his only comment was, "Wow, Emma, your mom has excellent taste in books," because he'd immediately gravitated toward my library instead of the expensive artwork or designer furniture. That's how I knew he was the real deal. David still doesn't know about my wealth, and that's fine. He loves Emma for her passion, her kindness, and her determination to make the world better through education. When the time comes to bring him into the family fully, it will be because he's proven his character, not because he's calculated the benefits. Michael Patterson thought he was playing chess, but he was actually playing checkers against someone who'd been building a business empire while he was still learning basic financial planning. The moral of this story? Never underestimate the quiet ones. We might just own everything you think is impressive. And to anyone watching who's been dismissed, underestimated, or treated like they don't matter because they don't look wealthy enough, keep building. Success has a way of speaking louder than critics ever could. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being successful while they're still struggling to figure out why their manipulation isn't working. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about hidden wealth, family drama, and the beautiful karma that comes when good people finally get their moment to shine. Your story matters, and your dreams are valid, no matter who believes in them or doesn't. Keep building your empire, even if you have to do it quietly.